Alright, hey guys, we are back with the Phase 3 Rogue PvP BIS gearing guide. So we're going to cover the best gear options, the alternatives, why you would pick some gear over the other. We're not only going to cover just the BIS list, but also alternative BIS for people that might not, for example, raid as much, or they don't want to go for the super contested items because they're super hard to get on a raid. So we're going to cover the different variations of gear you can get, jamming choices, engineering, jewel crafting, whether that's still a thing. We're going to cover all the frequently asked questions about Season 3 PvP. So yeah, let's get into it. Before we continue, I have to say a thank you to today's sponsor, Skillshare. So thank you so much, Skillshare, for sponsoring this guide. If you haven't heard, Skillshare is an online community with thousands of tutorials and classes on how to do almost anything. If there's ever a skill or hobby you want to try, chances are Skillshare has a class on how to do it. And you can see I use Skillshare myself. Even recently, I was going through Ali Abdul's course on video editing with Final Cut Pro X on Skillshare. And even though I've been doing video editing with Final Cut for so long, sometimes I just watch these courses to see if I can pick up little tidbits or little pieces of wisdom where I'm doing something inefficiently and I want to see if I can speed it up. And best of all, you can check it out for free. So the first 1,000 of my subscribers, click the link in the description below, will get a 1-month free trial of Skillshare. So thank you so much, Skillshare, for sponsoring this video, and let's get back to the guide. All right, so firstly, as always, I include a bonus section for the patrons. So this time I finally finished my enemy cooldown tracker weakauras. So if any of you guys watch Mir, one of the best TBC PvP rogues in TBC, just amazing all around. He's got this enemy cooldown track, so anytime an enemy uses something, it pops up. And it's I always really liked it because it was a lot cleaner than how Omnibar normally lays things out. Instead of just one jumbled mess, it's divided into 3 columns. So the problem is it's a real pain in the butt to copy his settings. You have to download a couple add-ons, you have to copy the specific folder and have the same version as he does, and then it made updating things really kind of funky, and it was just a pain in the butt overall. So what I did is I tried to make my own version using weakauras. So I looked at what was he tracking, how was he tracking them, and basically just recreated that in weakauras so that it's easy for me to import, export, to update them, add things as I want. So yeah, this is the updated, cleaner enemy cooldown tracker weakauras for PvP. So you can see here, there's 3 rows. One row is kind of for your long cooldowns. One row here is kind of for CCs and your shorter cooldowns. And one is for interrupts. And I made several versions because the advantage of doing this in weakauras is I could make just one that's very much the same as how Mir has his laid out. Then I could have another where I could say, okay, well, what if I'm not as advanced as Mir and I don't know all the icons off by heart? I want spell names on them. So I added spell names to them so that I could glance and be like, okay, oh, that's Vanish cooldown, that's Prep cooldown, that's Ice Block cooldown, etc. This is, I think, a lot easier for newer players who aren't obviously as experienced as someone like me. And then I had a request from some patrons who saw I was working on this who wanted to see if I could add names as well. So sometimes, for example, you run into a team with 2 rogues and they're both popping cooldowns, and then instead of just getting a mess of, oh, whose Vanish cooldown is this? Whose Blind cooldown is this? It'll actually have the name there. So yeah, 3 versions. One version is the super clean, just no names. One version with spell names, and then one version with the player name listed. All right, so just to show you guys quickly what it looks like in game, you can see I have my 3 bars here sorted. One line here is interrupts, one line here is the short cooldowns / CCs, one line here is the longer cooldowns. So it's all auto sorted, it starts from top to bottom, and it doesn't appear until the enemy actually uses the cooldowns, which is really nice. I like the clean setup. So if there's no cooldowns used, it'll just be a blank state like this. But then as the cooldowns are used, they'll appear one by one as icons like this. And you can track it. So yeah, I really like these. And as again, 3 versions, you can pick your whatever you prefer, whether you prefer caster names, spell names, no names on the icons. It's totally up to you. So yeah, links are on the Patreon. And if you aren't a Patreon supporter, you can go sign up if you're interested in these. And thank you so much for the support. Let's get on to the guide. Okay, so let's talk about your 2 BIS options. So option 1 is, this is the full BIS we're looking at here. So don't expect to get this, but this is kind of your dream ideal if your guild gives you all the gear that you want and you raid full time and you get warglaives and everything. This is kind of like the optimal, the best thing in my opinion. But there's a few side grades and choices you can make here. So firstly, it's Cursed Vision. Cursed Vision is huge DPS upgrade on anything else. Your alternatives are kind of the Season 3 PvP helmet or Deathblow goggles, really. And Curse Vision is just a mile ahead of pretty much everything else. So if you get Curse Vision, I would absolutely use it in Arena. It is just hands down better than everything else by a mile. But the downside is we are actually not prioed for Curse Vision in general. If we're talking about PvE performance, rogues aren't really prioed for Curse Vision. We're pretty much down near the bottom of the line for Curse Vision. So just be aware that while this is amazing for PvP, miles ahead of anything else, it is not something we are prioed. So don't necessarily expect to be able to get this unless you're super lucky. Now with the neck, we have Telonicus's Pendant of Mayhem. Very good item, still good from last phase. You can actually get a side grade or an item that's pretty close, which is the Choker. But this Choker serrated blades goes to other classes first in PvE. So I would not recommend trying to get this because we're just not proud for this at all. And Telonicus is arguably on the same level / better anyway. So there's no reason to go for the Choker when you can get Telonicus. And at this stage of the game, a lot of raids are kind of finishing up or almost done or done with the casters who are taking the Telonicus pendant. So you can pick it up from your next KT kill, or you can go to GDKP and the prices aren't as crazy anymore for Telonicus. So I highly recommend if you can get the Telonicus pendant. It's really, really good for next slot. Now for your Glad, you're using Glad 4-piece. So you've got your shoulders, you've got your tunic, you've got your gloves, and then you've got your legs. That's your standard 4-piece Glad. So as always, every season you always use 4-piece Glad because the set bonus is just too good. It's 10 energy, it's just really, really good. And 4-piece Glad is really good. So that's kind of like no-brainer options there. Now for your back, this is interesting because you do have a chance of getting this Shadow Moon Destroyer's Drape. It's BIS, and we're not low prio for this in PvE raids typically. So you actually do have a shot at getting the Shadow Moon Destroyer's Drape. And it is very good. But that said, I would almost say that Thalassian Water Cloak from Phase 2 is similar. And it's still really, really good. So if you can't get Shadow Moon Destroyer's Drape, I would not be sad to have Thalassian Water Cloak instead here. They're both very, very good options still. Okay, now the interesting thing here is the Vindicator's Dragonhide Braces. So these are typically not in the past what the rogues would choose, because in Phase 2, Phase 1, we always went for the other option of leather braces. But these are actually the Druid-ish versions, but the Druid-ish versions this time around are really, really good, right? So if we compare them to the leather bracer versions, you lose 26 attack power, but you gain 22 strength. So that 22 strength converts into attack power. You lose a little bit of agility, but you gain in survivability with more armor. You gain a slightly better socket with the red socket. So it's kind of like a side grade. Either option is honestly fine, but there's going to be a lot of rogues who are actually going for Dragonhide Braces this time around, particularly if they play Rogue Healer and they want to gear for that kind of a sustained, longer fight mindset. Oh, and one other thing I will say with braces is that you can also pick up Insidious Bands, which are actually really good if you're going for raw attack power. So for example, a situation where I might use Insidious Bands over the Vindicators is if I was playing double DPS. And I'm not playing a sustained fight, I'm just trying to get the quick bursty kill. I might use Insidious Bands if I had both options available to me. But again, this is a drop and it's going to take a while to get this. So most people will probably start off with Vindicators Bands and then swap over to Insidious. Maybe later if they're playing a double DPS. But throughout the whole time, Vindicators Dragonhide is just a very, very solid all-rounder good option, even if you're playing double DPS. Now, of course, we have Warglaives, and if you don't get Warglaives, then you would just be using the arena weapons, which are still very good here. But obviously, Warglaives just BIS, and your secondary options are just your standard arena weapons for Season 3. Okay, for belt, you have the Don Alejandro's Money Belt. Very good belt, a ton of stamina. Like a ton of stamina. But honestly, Belt of Deep Shadow is still really good. So I wouldn't be too upset if you can't get this belt, and you have Belt of Deep Shadow, which is pretty cheap now to get. It's still a really good option to keep using Belt of Deep Shadow. But technically, you could pick up Don Alejandro's Money Belt here. and it'd be a really good pickup as well. If you want to go on the tankier side, you could actually go for the Vindicator's Leather Belt, which is also a solid option, but it's slightly less offensive stat focused and more sustain and overall defensive stat rounded. So yeah, those are the 3 options. Now, Shadow Master's boots, crazy good boots, but again, very contested item. So we're definitely not first prio for them, I don't believe. So it's gonna be another fight on your hands. So a lot of our best PvP items are just really good PvE items this phase, and it's gonna be hard for you to pick this up. So I would expect a lot of rogues, they want this, and it's a really good pickup if you can get this, but you'll probably be using the Vindicator's Leather Boots for a lot of this instead, because it's going to take time. Even if you can pick these up, you're probably not first prior for them, so it's going to take time, and you'll be using the Vindicator's Leather Boots until then. Now, rings are an interesting situation because you have 3 really good options. You have the Storm Rage ring, obviously, Illidan drop, really good ring with armor pen. You have the Band of Eternal Champion, which is a big question mark. So the Band of Eternal Champion has a chance to proc 160 attack power. So it's got a ton of stamina, really good PvP stats, and it has a chance to proc this thing that boosts your attack power by 160. So is this big question mark because we don't know the exact proc per minute of this item. So until we actually do know this, we're just guessing. But as far as BIS rings go, it's between the Storm Rage Signet ring, the Band of Eternal Champion, and you also have the Ring of Deceitful Intent, which is also very, very good. Now, the plus side is a lot of people will probably end up with Ring of Deceitful Intent because it's not wanted particularly by any other DPS classes. I think maybe like Pharaoh Druids might pick this up as well or something. But the Ring of Deceitful Intent has very low competition and is very good as well. So I wouldn't be surprised a lot of rogues end up with this and then one of the other, which is Storm Rage Signet Ring or the Band of Eternal Champion. Now, Bloodlust Brooch still a great item. It's kind of interchangeable between Bloodlust Brooch and the Panther? Figurine Night's Eye Panther. Both are still good and usable items. It just depends on whether you prioritize the stealth bonus or the DPS of the Bloodlust Brooch. Both still very good options, depending on what comp you play. Personally, if I played double DPS, I'd probably still pick the Night's Eye Panther because stealth is really important. And honestly, Night's Eye Panther is still really good for like a quick burst period because as you can see, it's available active is only 12 seconds versus the Bloodlust Brooch 20 seconds, but the actual attack power you gain from the active is a fair bit higher than the Bloodlust Brooch. So that's just something to keep in mind, that it's still a very good active usage in burst situations, even though Bloodlust Brooch is the superior one for like a sustained DPS scenario. Then of course we have the Vengeful Gladiator's War Edge. So obviously this wouldn't be a high prio pickup. You can actually pick up the Season 1 for Honor this phase, but the nice thing about this one is it's got a nice slow speed, and from what I understand with throwing speeds, the deadly throw and such will always execute at the same speed no matter what the speed of your throwing weapon is. So even if you go back and you go to Season 2, so Merciless Gladiator's War Edge, which is a 1.3 speed, they will both throw the first throw at the same speed, and it's only the second throw, if you throw twice in a row, that where the speed actually factors in. So having a nice slow throwing weapon can actually be nice in that your deadly throws will hit way harder. So yeah, a Season 3 range weapon actually really nice in that it does big chunky deadly throw damage. Alright, so let's talk about a more realistic, easier BIS option. And this is more so what I expect most rogues to end up with, especially for Season 3, because it takes time for items and PvE stuff to drop. So most rogues are not going to be on Cursed Vision Prio, because we're so far down the totem pole. You're probably going to end up with Vengeful Gladiator's helmet, which is actually really good. The stats on it are super good actually. But it's kind of a one of two options. You can actually still use Deathblow goggles if you're engineering. They're still very good. Deathblow goggles are still really good. But yeah, you can pick between either the Vengeful Gladiators or the Deathblow goggles. Both are acceptable. So a lot of this, as always, comes down to comp. If you're playing a double DPS, I might value the stealth more because openers is double DPS are more important in 2s. But if you're not, then maybe I would value the just raw stats and sustain stats on the gladiator helmet. Again, Telonicus neck is here, but I left it here because I don't think it's hard to get it if you actually really want it. You can go join a GDKP and buy it. The prices of these have dropped a lot from the old days. It's still expensive, but it's not as crazy as it used to be. If you can't get this, you do have the option of going down to like a Vindicator's Pendant of Triumph, but you're trading a lot of attack stats here for defensive stats, which isn't the worst, but I would still... The Telonicus Pendant is just night and day, way better. Again, you're using your 4-piece glad, so you got your shoulders, you got your tunic, you got your gloves, and you got your legs. So that's your standard 4-piece glad. I would probably, if I was buying glad pieces, I would buy the helmet later on because I'd keep using the Deathblow goggles personally for quite a long time because in particular I play double DPS and the Deathblow goggles already have really good stats on them, so I would probably prior the other pieces first and then pick up the helmet after. Now, Shadow Moon Destroyer's Drape, as I said earlier, a realistic option to pick up if you raid. It's actually a realistic option because we are kind of like equal first-ish prio with the other classes here. So yeah, it's actually a realistic option, I think, to be able to pick up at some point in time. Again, we got the Dragonhide braces here, and with Warglaves prio here, even if you are pried for Warglaves, don't expect to be having your Warglaive set for quite a while. You might be lucky and pick one up early, but it's entirely possible that you go most of the phase, and it's not until next phase when you actually pick up your Warglaives. So yeah, statistically, a lot of people will not finish their Warglaives set, even if they are first prio on it, until phase 4. So I wouldn't be surprised to see a lot of people with Warglaves prio and who are in highly rated teams with extra points, they buy a gladiator weapon or two early on still while they're just waiting for that Warglaves to drop. So with a belt, you can pick up the Vindicator's Leather Belt, like I said, a nice well-rounded option, but it's actually perfectly okay to keep using Belt of Deep Shadow as well. Belt of Deep Shadow is really good with the 2 sockets. If you're playing double DPS, really good offensive stats on it. Yeah, so Belt of Deep Shadow is still a legit option here. Now for boot options, you still got the same Vindicator's Leather boots. I think that's a much more realistic early pickup, especially with rogues who don't really need much honor gear. And if you were 2k plus rated in any bracket for the entire season, you probably have a bunch of extra arena points. So you're probably going in here with 30, 40, 50,000 honor at the start of the season. And you can pick up your boots, your belt, and your braces just right off the bat really easily. So yeah, I highly recommend doing that. So for ring options, these are kind of what I would call your freebie pickups. We have practically no one else that really wants Ring of Deceitful Intent on the Abyss list. Outside of maybe a couple of druids that play Feral, potentially, maybe. But it's kind of like a freebie pickup for us. And then the Band of Eternal Champion is just Reputation Ring. So these are just really easy pickups for you to have. Then again, we have Bloodlust Brooch / Panther for our DPS trinket. And we have the ranged weapon. So yeah, this is a more realistic, good set that you can get that's not going to require you winning crazily contested items. Okay, so let's answer a few questions you guys probably have. NG, jewelcrafting, gemming. People will have questions about that. So a lot of you might ask, is engineering and jewelcrafting still the BIS professions? And it's a yes and a no, which is how a lot of this is going to go. It's going to be comp dependent. But the invulnerability belt, still insane if you play double DPS. If you play double DPS, this belt is still crazy good. It's going to be good for the rest of TBC, basically. You're never swapping this out if you play double DPS. The engineering belt it is too overpowered in 2s. Now, whether you use it in 3s and 5s, probably not, but in 2s, it is still BIS. So if you play 2s, you play double DPS 2s, engineering is still a BIS profession that I would not drop. Now, the blue hypervision goggles, those I think it is very comp dependent. Again, it depends. If you're playing double DPS, I'm still a big supporter of the blue hypervision goggles because the opener is so important, and blue hypervision goggles just make such a big difference in the opener power. So I still use both the belt and the goggles in a double DPS scenario. But if you don't play double DPS, that's where I would say that you might not need engineering anymore. You put could potentially just swap out, because you're the belt, you've got so many options. You've got Belt of Deep Shadow, you've got the Vindicator's belt, you've got the Money belt. For your helmet, you don't have to use the NG helmet. If you're playing Rogue Healer, you can use the Cursed Vision, you can use the Tear, you can use the Glad helmet. So yeah, I would say engineering still really good, and I wouldn't necessarily swap out of it, because technically it's the BIS profession for PvE still as well. So even PvEs are going to keep engineering. But if you don't have it and you don't play double DPS 2s, then it's not as big of a deal. Now, jewelcrafting, it's still good, but obviously the advantage of this stealth trinket is solely just in the trinket. Now, the slightly better stats on the gem is what you get: a 1 gem that's 24 attack power, and in phase 3 you can get gems that are 20 attack power. So you're gaining, if you're not using this trinket, you're gaining basically a gem that gives you 4 attack, which is basically nothing. So if you don't play double DPS and you don't care about the stealth advantage of this trinket, then I would say, yeah, it's fine. You can swap out of jewel crafting if you want. I wouldn't necessarily swap out of jewel crafting, because you might be swapping back into jewel crafting later, because in the late TBC, jewel crafting is popular again, because you have the PvE neck, and then you have the epic trinket, the upgraded version of this panther trinket that's coming in. So yeah, it's kind of like a side grade. But if you wish, you can swap out the jewel crafting for enchanting and enchant your rings, which is a little bit of stats. But these are really minor things, and personally, I'm just going to keep jewel crafting. I'm going to keep engineering. I'm not going to worry about it. It's fine. Okay, now, is stacking stealth still good? What about stealth boots? Yes and no. If you get Shadow Master's boots, I would probably stop wearing stealth boots, honestly. The DPS difference between the stealth boots that everyone has been wearing up till now and Shadow Master's boots is quite big, because Shadow Master's boots are crazy good and they have 2 sockets in them. So if I was playing double DPS, I might be tempted to, just because open is such a big deal, double DPS 2s. But outside of that, Shadow Master's boots are so good. It's getting to the point in phase 3 where I would probably not wear my stealth boots anymore if I have Shadow Master's boots. Just the raw stats on this boots are so nice. Okay, to finish up, let's talk gemming. So should you gem agility? Should you gem attack? What about resilience gems? What about hit gems? Well, the thing is, I think in phase 3 onwards, I expect a lot more people to just gem agility instead of picking between the two. Although I could still see if you, for example, you play only roguelock 2s all day, every day, I could still see someone gemming heavy attack power in that kind of niche scenario. But if you intend to do anything besides just double DPS 2s, I would probably just be going agility at this point. Overall, agility is just so much more balanced, and healer rogue teams are really strong, especially with druids getting stronger. So yeah, agility really good. Personally, if I have to pick, I'm probably going to go with a more balanced agility gemming route in phase 3. Now with yellow gems, you actually need 2 gems, because most people are using the Swift Skyfire gem, which is run speed and attack power on your meta socket, and you need 2 yellow gems. So as much as you want to just shove red gems and everything, you need 2 yellow gems to activate that meta gem. So you have the choice of either resilience or hit/agility gems. I think this comes down to personal preference and the comp that you're playing. Personally, if I was playing like a DPS focused comp, like double DPS 2s, I would obviously go the hit and agility gems. But if you were playing rogue healer and you're playing these really long sustained matchups, I could honestly see some rogues going 10 resilience gems. I think this is a personal preference thing though. Personally, I just always prefer hit and agility. I don't like gemming resilience. But I could see scenarios where you're playing that more sustained, measured playstyle with a rogue healer team, and you go the resilience gem instead. But again, this is only 2 gems. You're only really using 2 yellow gems anyway, so it's not really a big deal. It's a personal preference thing in the end. All right, so that's your phase 3 BIS list. Again, thank you so much to the Patreons for all the support. I couldn't do it without you guys. And if you're not signed up for Patreon and you want to go sign up and help support all these sorts of videos, you can check it out, linked below. Patreon's there, and I usually give you guys bonus week auras, tutorials, guides, and such. And by the way, just before you guys go, I do have a lot of PvP stuff coming up. So it's going to be mini content, but it's going to be almost daily PvP content where I'm going to do a lot of mini PvP guides, rogue specifically. So if you're interested in that, make sure you subscribe, and I will catch you guys when the videos start coming out.